Okay, welcome to the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for March 18th, 2014. Please turn off your cell phones.
Trying to do that.
And take any extra conversations out into the hall. We are making an audio and a visual recording of this meeting, and we're probably on TV.
Yes.
And if you make any recordings of the meeting, you need to tell us. So we'll go to the public meeting, public comment. Anything from the public on matters that aren't going to be heard tonight? Okay, seeing not. Public hearing notices of intent. The following are all continued to April 1st. Ooh, auspicious day. Baxter Road, multiples. That's the revetment project. Squam Partners LLC, 89 Squam Road. Duke 57 LLC, 55 Duke Road, Lot 16. And APG DRS Realty Trust, 80 and 84 Walwinet Road. Is there anybody here to speak on any of those items that will not be able to return on the 1st? Okay. So that takes us to the Nantucket Islands Land Bank and the Nantucket Conservation Foundation on Pulpus Road.
Art's not here.
Well, let's just, if Art's not here, let's just skip it, and then we can go down to North Wharf.
Old North Wharf, we'll come back to that when the consultant shows up.
Can I mention something? Were you talking about number 5?
Yes.
Art sent me an email this afternoon saying that he was going to have to continue that because of an issue with the DEP number or some issue with the DEP question. So
I do know Art wanted to give you guys a little bit.
We'll wait. We'll just wait and let Art.
So I know he's coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Roger McNevich. I'm an engineer with Coastal Engineering Company, and we're representing Old North Wharf Cooperative for this bulkheading project. This is a relatively straightforward project. The scope of the project is a repair, or in essence, a replacement of the existing steel sheet pile bulkhead in the section of Old North Wharf. It's been in place for at least 40 years. It runs about 208 linear feet along the face of the Old North Wharf, as shown on the plans. It represents an area that's held by several leases that are all called out on the plans, as you can see. The proposal consists of a fairly simple application and construction method that is typically done on these situations where you have an existing bulkhead with structures and fill behind the bulkhead, and it's extremely difficult to actually replace the existing bulkhead that's still somewhat intact. It's doing its job, it's holding back soil, and it's providing support for adjacent buildings behind the bulkhead. And that is, the bulkhead is placed as close as possible just outboard of the existing bulkhead, driven into place, and then we fill the space in between the old bulkhead and the new bulkhead to eliminate any voids for future material loss through the old bulkhead, to prevent subsidence and damage to structures behind the bulkhead. Typically we use concrete for that because it forms a nice tight seal. It's contained within the two bulkheads, and it helps protect the backside of the new bulkhead from corrosion. The proposed bulkhead, traditionally, because it's a steel structure, we call for it to be epoxy coated on the water side of the bulkhead. And we have done a similar application recently of a municipality on the Cape itself. It's a very successful application. These kinds of bulkheads are actually vibrated into place. There's a special type of plow driving equipment that's suspended by a crane, and it literally just vibrates each sheet into place. It goes very well. It's a very simple application. This bulkhead is designed to be a cantilever bulkhead. That means there's no tiebacks or supports. And we know it will work because that's exactly what the existing bulkhead is designed as. It's a cantilever bulkhead. We're using the same size and strength as the existing bulkhead over the entire length. The site conditions themselves vary across the site, and starting from the west end, which is the west end of the project is at the Mary Slade dwelling and yard area, the lawn area that's filled right up to the top of the bulkhead. As you proceed east, the next property is Lydia, Lisi. That too is a lawn area and a structure. So the first two Lisi's areas are actually filled right up to the top, and there's actual lawn in that area. Once we get to the Lydia cottage, then we notice that the grade behind the bulkhead, between the cottage and the steel bulkhead, starts dropping off. There's a slope, and then it drops down to the fill behind the existing bulkhead, drops down 3 or 4 feet, and it continues in that manner all the way to the very end of the project. It's contained on the landward side by a previous bulkheading system, a timber bulkheading system. All that area from that very point with the lawn ends to the very end is covered in decking by the individual leases, the entire area. We're proposing to not do any filling as part of this project other than to fill the space between the two bulkheads during the construction phase. Typically, when we install these kinds of sushi pile bulkheads, we call for a silt fence or a boom floating silt fence to be placed outboard, just outboard of the work area to contain any disturbance that which may occur or happen. But typically, there's very, very little disturbance because we're not letting any silt interact with any part of the work. We want to keep the operation as clean and simple as possible. When we were looking at this project in relation to performance standards, we were trying to decide what are the real issues, and technically we felt it might be considered coastal bank, but it's really a highly disturbed filled area. I'm sure we could even classify that as coastal bank and bulkheading of a coastal bank. But this area has been bulkheaded for many decades, years, and we feel that we're not really changing any of the resource areas by doing this project. And in fact, what we are doing is securing the security and stability and safety of the existing facilities as they now exist. We were issued a DEP file number by the DEP, Christine Odieger. She did have one comment that I've got to get back to her on, and that's simply what's the square footage of the area of land under the ocean that we will. It's the zone between the new and the old. There wasn't an issue other than the fact she just wanted to have that square footage for her files, and we'll be supplying her that. The area has not been mapped by the Endangered Species Program. There's no issues, and the letter from Division of Marine Fisheries was pretty benign. It's pretty straightforward. There really didn't seem to be much concern. You have a copy of that in your file as well. We see it as a relatively straightforward project. Typically a job like this, where there's so much development on the landward side, this typically would be done from barges with a crane on a barge. The barge in the harbor would never bottom out. The barges are large and they have relatively small draft for these kinds of projects. And it's really uncertain for me at this time if the sheet piling will come in and then carried overland, which would seem quite cumbersome to bring it down from an unloaded area and then bring it down through the town to the site and then unload it. I would imagine it would be much more opportune for a contractor to have steel sheet pile on the barge and take it off the barge and drive it, and keep things neat and pretty simple and straightforward. The work would be done in the late fall, early winter, which is typical to be beyond any kind of boating season, and this area gets quite quiet if you get towards the end of the year. All the facilities you see are fully licensed. There's a combination of water-dependent and non-water dependent licenses in all the facilities, including the existing piers, timber piers on the site. There's very little disturbance of those. Those piers are actually supported, self-supporting on their own piles. There's a slight little transition zone where the pier connects up to the bulkhead. So there's a space there that we can just remove a foot or so of the end of the pier and to be able to get the new bulkhead to pass by the existing pier structures. There's cleats and ladders and other hardware along the wall that we're merely just going to relocate or replace in kind in the location. It's not really proposing to change anything. And that's kind of pretty much it as far as the project. The steel sheet pile is usually driven twice the depth as is the height above the mud line to the top. So we've shown the dimensions on the plans. If you go to sheet 3 in the plans, you can see details and the depths to which the steel sheet piling is driven. The piling will extend from about elevation 7 down to elevation minus 22, along about 30 foot long, 32 foot long steel sheet pile. The sheeting is going to be clad with timber for aesthetics reasons, primarily. And that brings up one question that I did have as to the type of timber or treatment that the Nantucket Conservation Commission may or may not allow. In particular, is CCA allowed? CCA is by far the most durable and commonly used, and we use it on.
Yeah, CCA is the. I never remember.
It's chromated copper arsenate.
Is that what we don't?
No.
No. What's the other?
We've been allowing ACQ recently.
ACQ, I'm hearing from all of the, I hear from all the contractors working on the waterfront, it doesn't survive very well. Those two are available in tongue and groove for sheeting. Then the alternative is naturally resistant, which is the green heart type. But when you harvest green heart, we're harvesting the tropical rainforests. So there's an impact no matter where you go. So, but whatever the policy is of the commission, we would abide by it, and then have to adjust. So.
We've most recently just been doing green heart or ACQ.
Okay. Okay. It's good for me to know that now before we put that out to bid, and then.
Yeah.
And this is with epoxy coating, is that fairly common coating used?
We just finished the project in Howard, and it's almost like glass on the surface. It's hard. It's a hard big.
But they're not having bleaching problems?
No, there's no bleaching problem. It's a very hard material, and its purpose is to bond tightly to the steel and protect the steel from corrosion as best as it can.
To speak to a little bit, it's kind of interesting because we've seen a few of these projects recently, and this is one of the ones that the Division of Marine Fisheries letter doesn't specifically call out concerns for leaching of chemicals like they had with some of the other ones where there was some material questions.
Right.
This also is the one that has that epoxy treatment, and I thought it was interesting that they didn't provide any comments about it. So they're usually pretty good about, in their review, of catching anything that they've had issues with leaching or chemical sloughing. So
when it arrives at the site, it's quite hot. It's quite bonded to the. It's not like a gooey.
No, I'm more concerned about trace elements
Right.
bleaching.
Right.
I know it's not going to slough off. You wouldn't
Right.
want to.
I mean, it stays and it bonds, and it's very thin, so it can't afford to be leaving the surface of the steel to serve its purpose.
they didn't provide it. Long story short, they didn't provide us anything that they demonstrated any concerns. What's that?
Picture that off, might pick it up. That might be a fun material.
I believe most of you were at the onset we had about a month ago. And that snowstorm.
The other question probably is for Jeff, as far as time of year for winter flounders, all this,
Again, this wasn't something that they
they didn't call out.
didn't call out.
It's January, April, is that?
Correct.
January 1st to, I think it's May 31st, is typically the
So you
season,
get it done
so we
before.
get it done before.
Yeah. But they didn't call it out. This area isn't an area that's so common for winter flower. It's kind of this heavily trafficked embankment that's kind of this deep water milk hole. So I'm sure there's a more science in it, but it's kind of what it is.
That's the one, kind of a pump source issues.
Is there a need for a waiver since they're impacting land under the ocean?
Yes.
You know, since they're taking, I mean, it's that strip of land, but it is,
I was trying to tell from the drawing if that's
It's
Good
about,
to be-
it's about a foot, it's about a foot,
by,
because
by 208, so 200.
drawings always show the idealized situation. We want it to be as tight as possible, and you see the corrugations of the old and new match up perfectly, but in reality, that never happens. So it does go in and out, and it averages about a foot wide, so it'll be about a foot wide over the length. There really wasn't much concern by Christina Leager in the email. I believe I copied on that email. She just merely said, just for her records, please.
So
You
you
give
would
us-
have to give them a waiver for 208 feet of land in the ocean
Yeah.
impacted.
Well, you have that, and you also have, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, are we just chiming in, is that how we're doing this? We also have, the only resource area mentioned on the notice is the coastal bank, but we're in the buffer zone, or we have more resource areas than the coastal bank involved here.
yeah, because it is land under the ocean, and we do consider bulkheads the bank.
Okay.
So for work on the shore, we can, have the buffer zones put back.
No doubt we're in land subject to coastal storm flowage or nearby, or
It's 3.
et cetera.
Is that shelters separate from land in the ocean, or they're,
They are actually separate.
they are separate, that's what I thought, so it's actually 4. Even though it might not currently, it's probably mapped as potential habitat.
Yes. Don't believe we actually have anything really there.
But we still have to say, you'd have to have on the waiver, plus we don't think there's installed trails, here's what no on trails. If you found that when you were sheep on, dragging the sheep pile out, it's different.
Anything else from the commission, or anything from the public on the Old North Wharf? Well, Jeff, how do we need to handle the waiver request? We need to continue this and have it come back in?
Well, you guys can issue waivers. I'm just trying to specifically call out, I mean, we specifically have performance standards that deal with the repair and replacement of existing bulkheads. And this is a clear case where that is under land, under the ocean. So they're meeting the performance standard in that case because they're repairing an existing bulkhead.
This
So
is
there's-
just a bit unusual, and usually they're right up against the old bulkhead or something. This one's out.
Well, this one.
No, this is-
This
Most
one-
of them are usually,
This is often enough to back. This is as close as we can possibly get. And you can see the detail.
I would say this is-
Touching.
This is pretty typical installation, is they usually have enough of a void to install it, and then they get backfill. I know on the ones on Washington Street, it's been kind of the same thing where they get set in
it's
front.
basically setting like this, almost a V. You try to drive it straight, and this guy's caught down with it.
We're looking at the old bulkhead, some of them are slanted outboard.
Yeah.
They have to make sure the toe of the new bulkhead sheeting is out far enough so they're not putting them as a.
It'll just slide down the face of
Yeah,
that.
but then you want to find your poor spot,
Right.
and that's your.
The existing bulkhead still has a steel cap
Yep.
across.
No whaler. just
And
can't-
that's exactly what we plan to use as the false wick, the guide for the new, right hard against it. And then we're gonna actually, where we can, we're gonna tie it
Yeah,
together,
show
pull it right up tight to, it's structurally, it's a good idea to do
Yeah,
that.
kind of,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And then-
Concrete will make it.
And then to kind of continue through all of our resource areas there, again, that same bulkhead and repair of existing bulkheads and rebuilt under coastal bank, even though this is a man-made coastal bank, is there. And then obviously the buffer zones aren't in play because this is a water-dependent use, because you can't obviously put a bulkhead that's serving as a bulkhead. And then the only other performance standard that's really involved is this number 3, that all projects shall be restricted to activity as determined by the commission to have no adverse effect on bank height, bank stability, wildlife habitat, vegetation, wetland scenic view, or the use of bank as a sediment source. In this case, we're replacing a man-made bank with another man-made bank, so
So I guess that's.
that one doesn't really apply. And then, obviously, land subject to coastal storm flowage doesn't really have any performance standards.
It's not quite
Couple
land
on the
anyway.
waivers, I mean, under, land in the ocean, I think completely is doable.
So, well, land under the ocean, again, I mean, they have the right by performance standard to rebuild
Mhm.
the bulkhead, and then there's specific things. Sorry about that, I want to be sure I read the correct one. That's dredging, piers. I just never remember which number it is.
So pretty.
Yeah, so there's this number 5, best available measures as determined by the commission shall be used to minimize adverse effects of a commercial or residential pier on the interest protected by the bylaws. So you're conditioning to that performance standard. You're not waiving that performance standard. You don't want to waive it. You want to condition it.
Don't need a waiver.
Correct.
Right.
That's where you would be conditioning to do it. And then the only other one that really is there is water-dependent projects shall be designed and performed so as to cause no adverse effects on wildlife, erosion control, marine fisheries, shellfish beds, storm damage prevention, flood control, recreation, and aquatic vegetation. I don't believe you would want to waive that either, because you want to condition to that performance standard instead of just saying you don't have to meet the performance standard. We're going to give you a waiver. So typically in the past, a lot of these, we don't typically do waivers for these because we're conditioning to the performance standards.
Okay.
I'm not usually a fan of waiving
No.
the regulations. I'd rather condition it and put the burden on the project to comply to the conditions than waiving standards.
Okay, sounds reasonable. Anything else from the commission or the public? So Jeff, do we have everything we need to close the hearing?
We do.
You ready to close?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Real quickly, to go back over it, I did get a written request to continue the Land Bank Conservation Foundation application to the first.
Send this to the first?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll continue that to the first.
So I just had to check them though.
Okay. Daisy Field Trust, 78 Matticat Road, Lot 4.
It gives me a chance to get up and walk around.
Good afternoon, Mark Ritz from Site Design Engineering, here with Arthur Reed, representing Daisy Field Trust. We have two back-to-back. The first one is Lot 4. At the last meeting, we went over this project in a fair amount of detail. It's residential development of a property. All structures are outside the 50, septic is outside the 100. At the last meeting, I believe we were waiting for a file number and for some commentary from Natural Heritage. We're involved in a rather lengthy ongoing review process with them, and it's my understanding that Heritage sent an email to Jeff indicating that they would be happy with a condition that said prior to the start of work we'd have to comply with whatever their requirements are ultimately for this property, because we're likely to be in a review process with them for weeks, if not months, to come. Other than that, I believe we addressed most issues at the last meeting, but I'd be happy to answer any additional questions or go over anything.
I'm gonna, real quickly, sorry, but I'm just gonna hop in on it a little bit for that heritage update. Is this property is pretty extensive, as you can see, so they're dealing with the area up front that they're going to be conditioning, but part of what Heritage is also looking at is kind of a comprehensive property review. And their indication to me was they weren't concerned about necessarily a take, but they wanted to get their management plan for the property in place, but they're just not sure how long that's going to take.
For the whole
For
property.
the whole, all three lots put
For
together?
all four
All
lots.
four
for
lots.
this whole piece. So we've been working with them. It's Harrier habitat, potentially Harrier forage habitat, and we've been going back and forth with them and, you know, figuring out how much is going to be managed and how, and it's a time-consuming process.
But it's not going to affect anything that's proposed?
No, correct. Is their guidance to us back was that they would be happy if we added in a condition that simply said that prior to work beginning, you know, a conservation and management plan with natural heritage needs to be filed with the commission before work starts or whatever.
Okay.
Right.
Except by natural heritage.
Well, they're going to be one issuing that.
Yes.
That permit, so.
May I make one small suggestion on that? We've had recent input from Bob Kennedy, who's looked at this site, that it might not be such great habitat. So could we have some kind of wording that says either conservation management plan or no take determination? Just
Yes.
because there is a possibility that they might decide it's not suitable
Of
habitat.
course, yeah.
And then we don't want to have to come in and ask for an amendment for.
That's fair.
Their indication was also they didn't have an objection to us proceeding with our review against the Wetlands Protection Act.
That's the only thing we were waiting for?
Those two things, yes.
I do have a quick question. Is there a specific reason that the tanks themselves are inside the 50? It's all new
Ma-
construction, right? So-
Mainly because of grade, pumping, space, and setbacks from structures.
Structures. Are
They do need
right.
to have, I forget exactly
There's
what the setback
a
is.
10-foot
10 foot?
separation
Yeah.
requirement for any
Does the
septic
pool
tank.
count
I
as-
was just curious why it might not be in the driveway, but slope.
Well, there's one on the right, the east side, that's just near a pool, but not a structure.
Well, there's a pool house here.
So that counts as a structure for this tank, then?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. And then these two,
and then those two.
these are all underground tanks.
Yeah, we don't consider these structures under our regulations, so.
And these are
Yeah.
tight tanks, and then it's pumped to the leach field, which is
Oh,
outside
they're
the
tight
100.
tanks, sealed, yeah.
Yeah, these are just the pump chambers, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
Yes.
You ready to close, Mark?
Yes, we are.
I have a motion to close the hearing.
So moved?
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, now lot number 2. Mark, is this essentially the exact same thing?
Yes, once again, Mark Ritz and Arthur Reed,
Well, I think we
representing the
don't need to go
applicant,
through it.
and here's, whatever I said 2 minutes ago, exactly the same, basically.
Anything different about this one?
The only thing that's different on this is we've only got wetland on one side of this particular lot, and whereas on the other one, it wrapped around on 2 sides. Again, everything's outside of 50, and, nothing really different beyond that. Here, the tanks are outside the 50 as well.
Just to be clear, there is a wetland on the opposite side of Nantucket Road
Yeah.
that casts a buffer zone onto the property
Yes,
as
it's
well.
true, isn't it?
But it's,
Okay.
it's across the paved road, and there's,
And the only activity within
It's
the
just the
100 is a pervious driveway, gravel.
Okay.
same thing from Heritage and the DEP number from before.
Any other questions from the commissioner or the public? Okay. Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Move closed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah,
Okay, Nantucket Pond Coalition. The first one is Hummock Pond.
Okay, I'm Ken Wagner with Water Resource Services, here representing the Nantucket Pond Coalition as an applicant to do a vegetation harvesting program on Hummock Pond this coming summer. This is a continued hearing. I have provided some written responses to questions and issues that were raised at the hearing 2 weeks ago. So I guess I'm really here tonight just to answer any other questions you might have.
Why did we
did have to
continue this?
continue the hearing because we did not have a file number yet, which we have now. We did not have the natural heritage comments. Well, actually, they came in like right before the meeting, but we do have them now. And it had not been posted in the environmental monitor, which it has been now. So everything is cleared with DEP. The natural heritage comments were remarkably favorable. I'm not used to them being as favorable as they were. They actually exempted both projects from further review by them. And that is where we stand.
Other than the WPA Form 3, I didn't see anything in our packet as far as some written comments that you submitted.
I did.
Look for them.
Well, they were in there.
Okay, I'll look at it right now. If someone sees them on page, you can tell me.
I only noticed a comment for
Long
Pond.
I didn't see anything for Hummock.
No, there's a letter with both of them in it. Same letter. Has both.
Are you talking from you or from them?
No, from me. Oh, you're talking about from Natural Heritage?
Well, no, I don't see any.
You should have comments from Natural Heritage in two separate letters. That's correct. And then there's a letter with comments from me.
I didn't see that either. It's just forms.
Oh, it was in there.
Things can disappear here sometimes.
Well, if you just want to explain,
Yeah, just go
Was
through
there-
it quickly then.
we can add it to the record,
I
too.
don't have it all right in front of me, but for Hummock Pond, I just went through some of the considerations and the literature review on actual harvesting projects with regard to concerns that were raised. Certainly the first of them being the potential impacts to aquatic fauna, anything that might be picked up. Certainly fish have been known to be picked up. In fact, there was a great review in Cook et al., 2005, which is like the textbook on lake management, pointing out some fairly astounding numbers. I mean, thousands of fish, were taken out, and then concluding in the end that relative to the total population, it was found in every single case except one that it was insignificant. Just that when you get substantial amounts of fish coming up in a harvester, it's because the population is grossly overwhelming and stunted, and that in every case it proved to be a benefit. The one case where it was not, interestingly enough, was written by a guy who's a big-time proponent of herbicide application, and the supposition was that he didn't want to see them do the harvesting. But be that as it may, what was perceived last time is correct, that there will be fish that get picked up in this harvester. But if that is happening, it is almost invariably because there are so many fish in the lake that you really do need to open up areas so you can get better predator-prey interactions. The one exception would be if you were harvesting during spawning season, which would not be a good thing, and that has not been proposed. Spawning season for most fish is going to be spring, certainly not in the middle of summer when this would occur.
I did get a chance to talk to a specialist and answer most of my own questions, and I'm sorry, I would have read the letter if it was in
Sure.
here, which it's not. A couple of the questions were, has anyone ever tried shocking the fish before using a harvester to actually remove them?
No, because of the area you're covering, it would be just a huge effort. I mean, a typical electroshocking survey program that would cover maybe an acre total, it is usually $7,000 to $10,000. So you'd be adding that on for every acre or two that you did. It just gets to be out. And I don't know that you could really collect them and...
Well, she wasn't sure you could, she was just curious if anyone had ever done that.
Yeah, not to that. I think they've done it to find out how many are in an area. In fact, I was a reviewer for a paper once where they literally cordoned off chunks of lake and then checked to see how many little fish they had in dense macrophyte beds. And the conclusion of that paper was that when you had those beds, you had more fish and tinier fish, the biomass was less, and the energy flow was less. So it was not a good situation overall.
Her other concerns are, so basically I walked her through the project. She felt like if there was a person who was well-versed watching the conveyor, that you could offshoot the turtles and not...
Oh, absolutely. And that is what they typically do. Again, I've never heard of turtles being caught and disposed of with stuff. Usually they get them out of there.
Operator can see right there.
They're easy and they move on their own. The fish, they just flop around. They don't. If it's big enough, they'll get off. And again, that was another point of the review by Cook, was that you don't see big fish being caught. It's little tiny ones that are stuck in the vegetation.
Her concern, and it probably should be our concern, is that these harvesters are typically used. She said that the Charles River uses one quite a bit.
They do water chestnut control.
Yeah, water chestnut.
Yeah.
Her big concern was getting clean harvesters here,
Absolutely.
because we don't have any invasive aquatic plants.
Absolutely.
That's one of the primary ways to bring in. So
there is a protocol for cleaning, and in fact, there is now, if you're not aware of it, a state law in Massachusetts that prohibits the movement of any species between lakes. It says potential problems or nuisances, but they don't mean just invasives. So in theory, you can transport nothing between them. So folks like me that go around with boats have to go through a protocol of cleaning the boat. The guys definitely have to clean the harvesters, yeah.
can you submit that with your application, so we have the protocol?
Oh, what the protocol is for cleaning them? Yeah, sure. Yeah, usually it's a pressure wash or steam cleaning, yeah.
The trick is, getting a pressure washed off island before it arrives here. We've done such a good job keeping aquatic nuisance plants and invasive plants away.
No, you're correct. You definitely don't want to run any risk of it. And it's absolutely true that the harvesters who come over probably have been used on invasive species.
Of course, yeah, because that's why that's their purpose. Then the only other comment that she had that I would agree with is, as far as with phosphate loads, would it be useful to, and that brings me to, I noticed the SMAS table in here didn't have a date for when they did that 2013 work on the salinity and the dissolved organic nitrogen and organic nitrogen. That's kind of a side thing, because all the numbers were really low, which to me says late summer of 2013.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
That's the table in your application.
Right.
There's no date for when you took those samples.
Okay, well, what was the table of?
It was on page, it was table with all of your data of dissolved oxygen, percent dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, it's the SMAS table 2013.
It's like page 6 of his,
Page 6 of, yeah.
170 of ours.
All of the salinities were really low, yeah, table 2. All your
Correct. Well, it
salinities were low
is 2013, I believe, on
Yeah,
that
no,
one.
I mean, not, what day of the year.
Oh, yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know, but
Yeah.
it
It's just the numbers were weird. I've been looking at Humboldt Pond for 10 years now. Usually the salinities aren't all below 1.
Oh, actually, I know exactly what that's from, because Caitlin, working with you guys now, just did a summary of those data, and she showed it to me today, it was
Okay.
earlier. And it is 2013, and it is throughout the
Spring?
summer. No, throughout the summer.
Throughout the whole Humboldt Pond?
Yeah, yes. It
Just
is
for 20
striking,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
It is the lowest one on record.
Yeah, that's what I was
They were
saying.
almost,
Okay,
they were
because
all
when I looked
below.
at the numbers, it looked
Yeah, they were
insane.
all below.
2013 was a crazy year for
Okay,
salinity.
so for fresh water year.
Yeah.
Okay.
I bet this year's down there too. I've never seen the pond look like this before. It's
It's
3
very
foot
fresh.
higher than I've ever seen it.
And
It's
it's-
way up.
The groundwater is
Really?
about 3 foot higher around the island.
Interesting.
But yeah, her question was, would it be beneficial to test for phosphate before you run the harvester to see if it changes anything? Because I know the Pond Coalition is looking for this as not only a recreational benefit, but for ecological.
Right.
I don't know if it would.
Yeah,
or not,
well,
but
if we were doing a big piece of the pond, I would say, yeah, I don't know that we'd see any difference with it being, I mean, they're going to harvest over 10 days, 2 weeks,
yeah,
and they're going to do maybe 10 acres the first time
yeah.
out of a 142-acre lake. I can't imagine we'd pick up
Well, this
anything.
year, I thought it would necessarily be
Yeah,
a benefit.
it's an interesting idea,
Yeah.
but If you were doing a really big area, that would make sense. In fact, there is one lake that we only harvest about 40 acres of a 100-acre lake, but it's the 40 acres where almost all the plants grow.
Right.
It's all invasive species. And we do, in fact, make measurements there. Unfortunately, that lake has such high flow-through that if it rained the day before, it makes more difference than what we harvested.
Right, okay. Well, that was just a suggestion that she had that I thought was interesting, as far as
Yeah.
evaluating its efficacy and
Yeah,
showing
do you-
phosphate load
well,
and the nitrogen phosphate ratio.
It wouldn't be this summer, but at the same time, we are applying for a grant to look at more detail at oxygen and phosphorus dynamics in Hummock Pond. And if that went through, it would be the following year. If there was harvesting going on, we'd actually be getting information on the dissolved oxygen profiles and phosphorus and sediments and things like that at the same time.
Yeah,
So that we,
all these DOs are well lower than I've seen too. Okay, so that's good.
the DO, yeah, nobody seems to have values right at the bottom. And I suspect it is really low right at the bottom.
Yeah.
All of Jim Sullivan's work, he kept it off the bottom because he wanted to generate turbidity for his samples. Same thing for the MVP program. We're in that same grant program, we're proposing getting measurements right down to the bottom to see what we got.
Probably got to have them off the top of the head. Okay, so
Who were
that-
you said you contacted, so who was the contact you had, or where are they from?
Oh, it's with UMass Boston.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
And we've done with Jim Sutherland for the Conservation Foundation and Land Council, 5, 6, 7 years with it.
Oh, yeah, no, I've looked at all the water quality, and I talked to Jim about this stuff,
Yeah.
too. Largely because of that grant, we're trying to figure out what we really need to do to follow up.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all the questions I've got.
Any other questions? Anything from the public on the Hummock Pond application? Okay, so Jeff, do we have everything we need to close the hearing?
We do.
Ready to close?
Wonderful by me.
Okay, I have a motion to close.
Move to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, then we'll go to the Pond Coalition Long Pond.
Okay. Ken Wagner again, Water Resource Services, on behalf of the Nantucket Pond Coalition. We're a program, really a pilot program for Phragmites control with foliar spray being conducted at Long Pond, specifically the Massasoit Bridge Road area, with both control and treatment areas south and north of the bridge. Again, we discussed this at length last time. We do, in fact, have a file number. We do now have comments from Natural Heritage. I had a few comments that I added in the letter that you apparently don't have.
We have it on page 259 in our packs. We have something quoting mass endangered species.
Yeah, there's endangered species, yeah.
Change.
Yeah, that's the note.
That's the old stuff.
And again, we have very favorable comments from Natural Heritage on this one. It is, of course, a very small area. We're going to be doing more with monitoring than we are with actual treatment. A couple of open questions. One was whether or not they would cut the vegetation cut the dead vegetation prior to growth this season. They did inquire about that. They said for access considerations it can be helpful, but it doesn't really matter much to the foliar spray thing. What they're usually doing in a big application is riding around in a low ground pressure vehicle fairly high up and spraying down, and they are trying to get the tops of the plants. That's where the best entry and translocation comes from. In this case, they'd be walking around certainly in the fringe, probably in a boat, and spraying laterally or even up, which means there's going to be more dispersion of herbicide. It could be in the way. They were okay either way. They didn't feel there was an ecological reason to do it, but they would look at the site, and if they felt that in the biggest part, which is the northwest side, that if for access reasons they should cut that dead stuff first, they would do it. But otherwise, it was just an added step that didn't really matter greatly to them, or they felt to the program.
Well, I think by then it's not going to have leaves on it. It's just going to be the stalks. I don't think most of that dead stuff has leaves anymore.
No, the suggestion was that you could go around and cut the dead stuff down like now,
Yeah.
and then everything that grew would be fresh material, which if you're certainly doing cut and drip, it makes it easier
Yeah,
to
it
get
makes
at.
it a lot easier.
Their point was with foliar spray, it didn't matter that
Doesn't
much.
really matter.
It doesn't seem like a bad idea, it's just there was a reason it wasn't proposed, just because it added cost and they didn't feel it added much benefit. At the other end of the scale, the question had been raised about mulching. When you do a small area, they tend to mulch with just electric hedge trimmers, and they cut, 6, 8-inch swaths off of it and drop it down and leave it as a coarse mulch. When they do a big area with the low ground pressure equipment, they haul a mulching mower head behind it, and that literally grinds it down. This is done after the treatment has taken place and after things have died off, but to knock everything down. So the reality is they would not necessarily plan to cut any time prior to treatment, but they would indeed plan to cut and mulch at some point after the treatment. So there would be nothing left, either treated dead stuff or dead stuff that was left from the year before would all be mulched. On a larger scale project, the mulching tends to be done with these bigger equipments, and you do get to the better quality mulch. On the smaller projects, it's done by hand.
Well, it seems like that would, just even cutting it down would make it a lot easier to find the remnants.
That's correct, and that's the most important piece, I guess, is that the next year, whatever pops up, you see it right away. Now, there's an interesting development. We had a meeting today ahead of time. We're just discussing options. It was found that at least there is one really good review report on Phragmites control that suggests that herbicide treatments in June may be very effective. I'd never heard that before. We're not planning to do this one in June, but it's something to keep in mind.
Do you know what report that is?
Actually, it came from Rachel, is a review of 40 years of Phragmites control. The last author of a pile of 6 or 7 is Dennis Wiggum, who I know. I didn't recognize the other names. I couldn't tell you what the person, but well, you were going to get it to me. I'd certainly be happy to supply it to you guys.
She can send it around too.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
That's good. So-
We were discussing monitoring efforts and what we might do to beef things up for ecological purposes and for the purpose of getting more out of it, not necessarily for the purposes of getting a permit, but just to do a bigger and better job of it. And that came up in the course of discussion.
The only other thing I would think is if, depending on what kind of density you have following the initial treatment, does it really pay to spray, especially if you're spraying from a boat and sort of, if you're going to spray with, scattered stems, I think you'd have to walk up and really just directly spray a plant.
You would on that, right?
Might
Well, the
be easier to just
boat is
flip them
only
in
the
that case.
little fringe on each side,
Right.
and I don't know if they will try to walk that from the land side or spray it from the water side or both. The bigger patch, they would be out in it, walking around.
I'm just thinking for follow-up treatments, if that might be a time when clip and drip is
If
acceptable,
it is small enough,
yeah,
that
if
would
there's
be.
relatively few
In
stems.
fact, the progression, because you don't know exactly how much regrowth there is, that first treatment, again, thinking in terms of this representing possibly a bigger treatment at some point, you would use the foliar spray to get under control. The second application, it's presumed there almost always is a second application the following year, would depend upon how much regrowth there was. That's correct. In some cases, there is a third application. I would most certainly think that would be on a much smaller scale, individual plant, clip and drip type stuff, if it was needed. Yeah.
Well, to speak to that a little bit, that's something that you guys can condition, you can set up, because there's obviously monitoring and things that go on that you can do kind of an annual review and
Yeah, I would think
discuss. You can permit both methods and then,
I think we'd
essentially
have them come
condition the
back in,
methods to say.
do a
Yeah.
report and have them
Yeah.
come back in and.
Because that way, if
Check
it's,
Go through the results before, yeah, it makes
yeah,
sense.
that way we can, this is a pilot project, so I think to see what we're getting for regrowth and to look at it and
Yep.
have kind of an adapted methodology to what we're really seeing, I think would probably be a good way to condition this.
Yeah, in most of the plant control projects, not necessarily Phragmites, but plant control projects that I get involved with, if there's an herbicide involved at all, it's that first brush, get it under control, and then we move to physical controls from there almost invariably. So even if it was a follow-up herbicide, it would be a different one, done smaller scale, so you are correct on that.
Okay.
As far as ideas were, one of the concerns was about spraying air, once you spray, having it dispersed further away.
Mhm.
So I think on one of your first maps you showed us, you had an area that you were going to look at both Phragmites or other natural plants. I mean, what kind of ways are you going to mitigate or evaluate?
Yeah, evaluate, there's no
Yeah,
mitigation in
yeah.
this one per se.
No, it's not.
Well, we've got the channel in between the
Mhm.
two areas that are being sprayed, and you gotta know something's gonna land on there.
Mhm.
We will measure the concentrations,
Mhm.
but we'll also look at benthic invertebrates and aquatic plants in those areas, and there were 10 plots for the treatment area and 6 plots in the control area. There'd be a transect through the treatment area where every so often you'd be doing plots for vegetative analysis. And then there would be similar transects through non-treated areas 5 meters out and 10 meters out. Now, that's another one where once you do the initial assessment of the area, maybe you move it a little bit on the west side, and that's not going to happen. It gets to be such dense brush, you can't even move through there. On the east side, it's a little more grassland going up the slope, and maybe we can spread those out a little bit. And I think a lot of that should be when you actually go out and do the initial survey work, that we lay that all out and get a spacing that makes sense in light of what we think will go on.
I think a couple of people I talked to about this project were concerned that you got a pre-measurement of glyphosate, because there might be a lot of homeowners in the area that are using it, or there might be.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So
Oh,
a couple
yeah.
of people I talked to said they might want to,
Yeah, there isn't-
before and after
There
measurement.
isn't much going on there, but yeah, I see your
You
point.
never know.
Yeah. I mean, there's only one residence that's anywhere near the area, and then there's a couple more that are closer to the control area, but there's really only one that could have a direct impact on it. But yeah, I do see the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was their only concern, was
Yeah.
more of effectively monitoring the
Yeah, very
pre-seeds.
early in my career, I was looking at pesticides in New Jersey, and they had a fire at a garden center,
Mhm.
and of course, it all went into this linear lake. We said, oh, well, let's go monitor that. So somebody brightly, it wasn't me, said, we should look upstream too. The numbers were just as high upstream, because of course, what would people were buying it
Imagine
and
that,
using it.
Right, right.
Didn't think of that. I don't think that would be the case here, but that's not an excuse for not doing it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it just helps you evaluate better on what kind of
Yep.
breakdown you're having. So I thought that was good advice.
Anything else from the commission or the public on the Homing Pond project?
Long Pond.
Oh, we're on Long Pond, excuse me. Yep,
We just closed on it.
that's right.
And the same one, we can condition that we get all of these pre-reports, that everything that they generate, even if it's just of ecological value, I think will be of value to us and permitting further projects down the road.
Yes, and I would say, I think, I don't want to put words in Mr. Wagner's mouth, I think part of this project is to demonstrate the viability of this method for controlling Phragmites. So I think as much information as we can get to evaluate is always helpful, even if it's information that says nothing has happened.
Sure.
So we
And
know.
that's, and, I mean, the other things we're interested in, this was part of our meeting this afternoon, was, if, when you look more at the pattern of vegetation over time and does it change, what happens a year out? If we get nothing at all and the Phragmite doesn't grow, that sounds great, but that's no good if other things aren't filling in already. So what else comes in? We haven't really defined success in this case. That's why it's a pilot program to see what happens, and then we'll say, okay, here's why we would do what we are doing, and this is how it should work, and here's why you wouldn't do it this way, because it just gives us that information. It does not guarantee that anybody gets to do this anywhere else, even if it does work. It's just that it's a start to figure out, can this be used, because you're going to need something other than clip and drip for big areas, if indeed they want to control them. And I realize that in itself is a debate to be had.
With the salinity here, is it more likely that cattails or spartina would come back?
I think cattails.
That's what my guess, too.
There's no evidence, at least in Long Pond, that they've ever had much spartina.
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
And I don't know what else we might get in there. There are other things around. I don't know. The woody stuff would take a bit longer, but in terms of ground cover, at least on the east side, there's quite a few other plants growing on that hillside. Yeah.
Okay. If there's nothing else, Jeff, we need to close this hearing.
Yes.
You ready to close?
I am.
Okay. Do I have a motion to close the
You
hearing?
sure do.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Ken.
Should I be here when you're talking about what to do next? I mean,
That'll be later.
right, I know, but I mean,
Yeah,
is
that
that
would
some?
No, they'll deliberate the draft that they want for like conditions and those things, and then I'll write it up.
You can answer questions for clarity, but you can't.
No, the question was, did you want me to stay put, or is that not necessary?
No, it's not necessary.
Fine. Okay. I just didn't want to leave. having-
You've got a vote to break or something, or go for it.
Great.
You can try to take that hair off the plate right back.
Yeah, it's not till a little later. Yeah, it was exciting. Hey,
I'll bet, yeah.
The ferry would have been more interesting, but it didn't even go.
So you'd be green if you came over on the boat. huh?
Especially those
Such up
fast
for yesterday,
boats.
but.
Yeah, and they're rocking.
Okay, that takes us to the Nantucket Harborside condominiums on 80 Washington Street.
Huh. Yeah.
All set? For the record, Leo Azadorian with Blockland Associates. We filed a notice of intent to repair an existing bulkhead that was constructed sometime prior to 1952. Right off the bat, I will tell you that there is an existing license for this bulkhead. This bulkhead system through here went all the way to the Great Harbor Yacht Club. It was all constructed by Robert Dealey and Mike Todd when they were running the boatyard back in the 50s, and actually returned, the bulkhead returned back up to this point right here. During the amnesty program, we never got a response because we filed amnesty licenses for the bulkheads to the south, and we never got a response from the condominium association about. We've already opened dialogue with Chapter 91 about proceeding with the license. They know we're in front of you right now, because obviously we've made the filing and they're aware of it, and they just want us to go through the process. We'll go through the licensing process, not only for the bulkhead, but for the fill and for the structures that are sitting within tidelands as well. The proposal that we have in front of you is twofold. We had two options, either steel or wood. A portion of this bulkhead is usually inundated underwater between mean low and mean high water most of the time. We used ACQ wood on the two bulkheads to the south because of the durability. I have a little bit of a problem with the ACQ only because of using galvanized bolts. They have a tendency to rot much sooner than anything else. But if you look at the condition of a lot of these steel bulkheads, for example, the Great Harbor Yacht Club steel bulkhead was reconstructed in 1992, and we've replaced the caps. If you look at the outside, they really rust. Talking with Bruce, I asked him if, and it was in the letter that I got from DEP, looking at an alternative as opposed to ACQ, which has displaced CCA as a wood preservative. And they mentioned plastics. I don't know how durable plastic is, and we're a little leery of it right now. But again, we haven't determined whether we were going to go with a wood or a steel bulkhead in place. One of the important things to discuss here with the commission is the fact that my clients have contacted two different contractors to do the work. Both of them have said the same thing. We'd have to bring a crane in from off island because of the position of the buildings in there. We don't really have direct access to the beach, and they both said the same thing, that the crane operator would be working blind. He wouldn't be able to see what's going on. They didn't like the idea. In the meantime, I've already contacted the selectman's office, getting temporary access to the front of the beach down here over town land where the kayak rentals are taking place. One answer that I've inquired about, and I haven't heard back from them, is the lease operation of the kayak operation, because there'd be a disturbance to them in the fall if they go into October. We don't know when they're working, but obviously we couldn't do anything until after their lease time has run its course for the season. I know when we were doing Lyle Hollins at 90 Washington Street, at the time, her bulkhead got destroyed prior to 92, and the two parties, the neighbors, couldn't agree on access to the site. She had the same problem as they did. And I know Lyle had talked to the selectmen, several of the selectmen, and went into the selectmen's office about access to her bulkhead over the town beach. They didn't seem to have a problem with it, but no formal application was presented to the selectmen. So we don't have a history of whether they're going to say yes or no. At this point in time, I don't think they'll say no, as long as we put the beach back the way we found it. And both, the only two contractors that are going to be able to do the work is either Toscan or AGM, and they haven't decided on who is actually going to be doing the work at this point in time. We did hear back from DEP regarding the resource areas. I have a little bit of a discussion with Christine. I haven't talked to her. I sent her an email back until I get back to her after the first hearing. But the application was for 181 linear feet of bulkhead to be replaced. The old bulkhead ended right here. It didn't make any sense to end the bulkhead below the mean high water, so the application in front of you is to go all the way back to the corner of the deck that's there right now. There's basically a facade underneath the deck. It's not the original bulkhead underneath. So the 181 feet actually runs from here right to that corner right there. She interpreted it as ending where the existing bulkhead ended right there, but our application is to run it the whole way. It didn't make any sense to stop short of the mean high water line of the bulkhead. So I have to point that out to her. We also, when we made the application, we did pay for the linear footage of the bulkhead to be replaced all the way up to the corner. Some off-site issues, or on-site issues, I should say, is those two existing catch basins. When Jeff and I and my client met with Jeff out there initially before we made an application, the two PVC, 6-inch PVC pipes that come out into the harbor, what to do with them. Obviously, there isn't any drainage from Washington Street down that end. If there were, it would have been ideal to route it that way and would have gone through, basically the runoff down there goes through the Great Harbor Yacht Club treatment system, but the drainage doesn't extend up that far. And underneath that road is all the buried utilities. It would be impossible. So what we're proposing is to do what we did at the electric company property for the parking, the town parking scheme, is to do these Triton catch basin inserts. It's in the back of the notice of intent, the literature on it, and they seem to work quite well as long as they're maintained and replaced when they do get to the point that they're not functioning anymore. And they do remove hydrocarbons and other things. So as a first line of defense would be to install these Triton inserts into the basins themselves to protect the outflow into the harbor itself. Right now, there isn't anything. It's just into the catch basin and out it goes. Right. This basin right here comes out and goes into this location, and this one comes out and comes in this location. If you look at the project photographs, I think you can see the PVC pipes coming out through the existing bulkhead.
So this Triton is actually put in at the beginning of the infiltration?
They're put in right inside the catch basin themselves. They're lifted off, they're inserts that go in there, there's a carbon filter. And what it does is obviously if there's any issues with any oils or anything leaking into it, it does clean it out before it goes in. Unfortunately, they've been in place for going on 20 years right now without any pre-treatment. So, and that's something that my client would be handling with their other contractor. The contractor doing the work wouldn't be doing it. We would measure the basins and order the correct inserts ourselves, which is what he wanted us to do, and not leave it up to somebody who just usually builds bulkheads for a living. So I guess at this point in time, any questions or any concerns? And I guess the most important thing is the access to the site, and any comments that you have, if we did go over the town beach and access the site that way. Both contractors had different ideas of what to put down. Some said that they probably just put sand down. Some would say they put planking down or, metal plates or whatever, but it's going to be done in the fall. We're looking hopefully by October 1st, depending again on the kayak rental season, the early season.
Any questions?
So this is a unique bulkhead because there's nothing behind it, really. I mean, the buildings are all up on piers.
The buildings were in piers. The project was proposed in the mid-'80s, 86, 87. I actually have the project plans here by Benjamin Churchill. If you look at the photographs, and I do have some photographs
We
with
saw them
me.
through the holes when we were down there. Yeah. I wonder if that was continuous around the hole.
They're all on piers, right.
So there's no real fill behind this.
Right,
thing.
other than the 1,000 sandbags that were placed there at some point in
I saw
time.
that.
But the proposal is to drive 12-inch diameter green-heart piles in. What they didn't want to do is they didn't want the bulkhead forces going into the support for the buildings.
Right.
They wanted it separately to take the storm effect. They've said in the past that the buildings just really shake on it when you get a good release. So
I bet they should this time.
they're basically tied back. If you look at the details, both the steel and both the wood have tied back piles driven for that purpose. Would be to store absorb the storm surge in that location.
Water won't be able to get through this structure if it get. It will, but
Yeah. Well, the issue here is that the deck elevation is about 6.4. This building and structure, I think I included the FEMA map in the notice, is 10 is on one side and 11 is on the other, so they're really below, they're in the velocity zone right there right now. And as you saw the last time, the shingles got ripped off because the waves were literally hitting the building itself. Other than elevating, moving the houses off and putting in new piles and raising it above the velocity zone, there's nothing more they can do, to be honest with you. But I think the bulkhead really is just to stabilize underneath the supports for the buildings themselves and absorb the storm action, nor'easters.
Other questions? Anything from the public on the Washington Street project?
So the maintenance of those inserts would be with the owners?
The association, the Harborside Condominium Association. We would probably expect that to be written into the order.
I don't know, what do you guys think about closing this without the information on what the bulkhead's going to be made out of and an access plan?
I think we need both of those. Or what do you, I don't know, what do you think?
That's my feeling too, is that it would be.
Without the access plan, the project's
Not going to happen.
Not happening.
happening.
We don't have a problem with that. I do have one comment, though.
Okay.
If I come in with an emergency permit the next time to do the work, because obviously, as Andy pointed out, we have some wood that's just hanging off of that thing. They would like to repair the deck temporarily, and on the front, just use clear pine, no 2x6s, no preservative whatsoever. It's all going to be ripped off in the fall anyway. So if I came in with an emergency permit, had it issued the next time to do this work, Jeff, would that be a problem? Or if we close the order next time, they could get it done?
I think that's a way. I think to deal with the cleanup, I would probably prefer to deal with the debris as part of an enforcement action to clean it up, as opposed to emergency permit. Because then an emergency permit, you're triggering a filing to normalize the emergency permit. It'd just be a nightmare. But I think if you can get that access plan put together, it doesn't sound to me like there's any reason why we couldn't issue out an actual order of conditions if an access plan was formalized and kind of a decision was made on what type of bulkhead is going to be gaining the permit.
Okay.
I think we can just, as we get closer, and if it turns out for cleanup purposes we need to issue out some sort of enforcement to deal with cleanup, we can certainly do that, I think.
Obviously, the deck.
I like that approach.
Whatever's done in there, though, has to get them through the summer season. So obviously, they're going to be fixing the deck and putting that pine facade on the front.
Yeah, I
Making
think
it accessible.
I wouldn't want to include the deck and facade as part of enforcement. I think if you're going to provide us the access plan, I think a plan for the summer to be included, just a little narrative that says what you want to do, could get put into the regular permit, and they'd have plenty of time to construct it even after appeal periods and the order of conditions gets issued. And then the cleanup can happen sooner, and then that would be part of the regular permit, so until it was fixed, you would be on a permitted structure. I think that would be a better way to go than to try to do it through emergency and then try to permit it after the other permit for the bulkhead's already done, so.
So we need to just continue this if there's no other questions or comments? Want to continue to the first?
That'd be fine.
Let it ride.
Doesn't hear an objection, we'll continue to the first. Thanks, Leo.
Thank you.
Okay, takes us to public meeting, minor modifications.
Nantucket Land Bank?
Oh, let's go back.
Oh.
Number 5.
Oh, that's what, sorry, Art sent us a requested
Yeah, we continue
continuance.
that.
You do want to
Yeah, I just got it in my email after I noticed, so.
We were really subtle on that. We did it kind of.
Yeah, kind of on the quiet there. Sorry. Okay, GLP Trust LLC, 33 Squam Road.
All right, so this one's just easier. It's in the packet. So in permitting through the HDC, some of the things changed. Nothing changed buffer zone, but a little extra curve to the one wall in the back was made to add. Yep, this is the Squam one. So there's the HDC submittal that's in there. And there's a little letter in the front where some of it is just landscaping change, but I'll just read it real quickly. Installation of stone walls, infinity edge pool, fire pit, and patio have been approved, and they've made the pool smaller because they're making it into a regular pool instead of an infinity edge pool. So it's getting a little closer to the house, so then the retaining wall is getting curved a little bit differently to encompass that new dimension. So they're just trying to make sure that their current landscape plan matches their approval, because there's a different landscape plan that's approved by our order. So they're just trying to normalize it. So again, it's not changing any setbacks, and it's just kind of a scope of work change and actually making the pool smaller. So it's no new conditions or anything. No,
Seemed like it was actually lessening.
it's lessening the.
Yeah, that's what the verbiage.
It's lessening the impact to the buffer zone. Or the better way to put it is, it's increasing the setback.
Yes, there
That's
is.
just an easy way to put it.
Move approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously, so I guess we just issued that as a nod.
Yes.
Okay, Levine at 23 and 25 Pilgrim Road.
Yes, this is the same. Sorry. So this is the same, kind of the same pool things. This is one that's interesting because the pool itself got a little bit bigger, but it moved closer to the house. So it's increasing its separation from the 50, even though it increased the size outside of the 100. And again, they also, when they shifted the pool, have shifted the retaining wall that kind of runs around the pool. But again, it doesn't change the buffer zone, and it doesn't really increase even the square footage of the wall. It's just kind of reconfigured. So this is kind of we had a landscape plan, went to HDC, had to make some changes. This new landscape plan, we want to make whole our Concom permit.
Okay.
The issue is minor mod?
Second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Schweitzer at 6 Jefferson Ave.
All right. This is another one that's pretty straightforward. This is one where we approved the picking up of the house. And I know this is going to seem trivial, but again, to try to make whole is through their process. There's a deck that's kind of clouded out in the back here that they've broken out. Is it was originally just approved as a deck, and through their HDC approvals, is they've now added a roof over that deck. It's just in the flood zone. They're just trying to.
It just doesn't start anywhere, not putting new structure in the 25 or
Nope.
something.
So they're just trying to make whole their permit. So
Move to issue the minor mod. Everyone's okay with it?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Five Star Properties, 7 Eastern Street.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos, representing the applicant Five Star Properties. This is a minor mod to a notice of intent for the construction of a utility room at 7 Eastern Street. The utility room was approved on this side through HDC and other concerns. It's been slid to this side of the structure, still within an existing deck area where this one was not. So it's been slid from this side of the building to here, completely within an existing roof and deck area of the site. They also waited to pull a building permit, so the room also has to be elevated down to the current flood zone regulations, so there was a minor adjustment to that. And that's what the minor mod is.
Okay, no impact on any other buffer zones or anything?
No, actually further away. Again, this one
Okay.
was here, that one's here, it's further out, and it's completely within the
Careful, all
existing
that.
structure, just under a roof deck.
Move to issue the minor mod.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, certificates of compliance.
Let's do a whole bunch.
You tried that, Mike. I have to give him credit for his persistence.
Yeah.
He's very consistent.
Doesn't give up.
I will just say, Mr. Chairman, I do think there's a lot of work that probably can be done at the staff level that we tend to sort of bog down on in meetings from time to time, and I just think it's something worth floating around from time to time. As the workload increases, the staff grows, government turns into this big bloated government thing, we can just get this stuff all done and
What
come
you're
in
saying
here
about Jeff there.
and deal with it, yeah.
Oh, well, one of these days we'll agree with you and shock the heck out of you.
there is some merit, I think, to some of those things.
Find a new
So,
mission.
Okay, so we're wasting time here. Kaufman, 174 Cliff Road, this is a reissue.
yeah, Mr. Kaufman lost it. He came and picked it up and lost it on his way to his attorneys. We issued this at the last meeting. He literally lost it somehow. Yep. So we issued this last time. Again, there's no ongoing conditions.
No dog ate it, he lost it.
He doesn't know what happened to it, but he was all in a
Find it
hustle
5 minutes
to.
after we sign this.
It was one of those great moments where he was in a hustle to come get it recorded for refinance or whatever, and was in such a hurry that he managed to lose it, and it now delayed him 2 weeks. So
It's like under
Yikes.
a seat or something.
he'll find it. He'll find it tomorrow.
So do I have a
Yep.
motion to reissue? Kaufman, do I have a second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Sullivan, 60 Cliff Road.
All right, Sullivan, 60 Cliff Road. This is one that we issued last year, and this was for the construction of the wooden deck over an existing concrete and stone patio, and then a little expansion under the under the amended order. So, for those who don't remember, I'll just hold it up from here. It was the stone patio that was in the back that they have covered with the deck. It's built in compliance, and I mean, it's really kind of hard to miss because it was already in place. So there's no ongoing conditions for this. So it's built correctly, so I would recommend that we issue the certificate of compliance.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Arno, 27 Easy Street.
Which one is this one?
The first one is SC 48 2000.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I have the right one. Because the one is Bobby Mack wanted to be here for this one. The most straightforward. So 2000 was for, this was the repair and maintenance of the existing bulkhead
Yep.
that was there. They just need to file their as-built plan of the bulkhead, which Mr. Emack has done. The bulkhead is built in the correct location. It's kind of an older order as it is.
Which is higher in fiber tile instead of steel.
And it's built in compliance. So I'd recommend the issuance of this as well.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Now Arno at 27 Easy Street, SC 481165.
So this is for one that was never done, and obviously it's long expired, so they don't have any intention. So this is just simply the making this order of conditions invalid.
I move to issue a certificate of compliance that the work is not done.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
I really want to say the invalidation.
Yeah, invalidation.
Okay, orders of conditions. Okay, that one didn't happen.
So we talked about some that didn't happen. So the ones we closed out tonight were, that I prepared drafts for, were 2, 3, and 4, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, because
I
we
did start of the
So
that
the
project.
278 and no.
Yep. And then I had drafted one, or started one for the condo one, but that project got a little bit more involved after hearing the narrative and wanting to have some options and then not having official access. It spiraled into a closure category pretty fast.
Okay.
Yeah, knowing the basic material.
So I guess we're on Old North Wharf first.
Yep, so this is the one that we closed tonight. I don't need to explain it too much, so. Oh, Well, we have that any work beyond May 1st will require authorization from us, but we can change that specifically to if we want to change it to January 1st, that matches the winter fauna habitat a little bit. That's certainly easy to do, and we can just kind of review it as we go. Other than that, it's, yeah, I think.
Work start and stoppage will require authorization from commission staff or whatever.
Yes.
No straightforward.
Yep. And then I think we wanted to add a condition 24, conditioning the type of wood on the front. So I think that would be easier just to put that. I think if we put the timber facade must be constructed of material other than CCA, then they can pick.
Cedar cladding.
Well, we see CCA sometimes still for pilings.
They don't do well.
Or teak.
ACQ doesn't work very well,
Varnish.
and Greenheart.
Makes them too bright.
Yeah.
And ACQ snap, and
Keep it
then
looking pretty.
Greenheart twists and snaps.
Splits, checks.
Yeah.
It's tremendously more expensive. Again, it's reinforced.
So if you could invent a material of piling that works really well, provides all those things, you could retire.
About reinforced concrete.
Yeah.
That doesn't wear out in the ocean too.
No, that actually.
No,
be
that
good.
works well.
That's good for the environment. Naturally.
Again, extremely expensive.
Yeah.
The
Pretty
CCA,
stressful
there's just so
requirements.
many, there's the hundreds of pages of damage down the marine line from, I'm just.
It's a heck of a lot better than creosote.
Yeah.
Okay, we can
Steel.
have this discussion on a later date. So do I have a motion to issue as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Can actually still measure creosote in the harbor.
Oh,
We picked it
I'm
up.
sure. That stuff loses off and stays for.
You think on those weld ships ever had any tar on them?
For the Daisy Field Trust.
All right. So these two are going to be the same, and I can't believe I forgot to type it after I got off the phone today. Because I would like to add that condition 19, that prior to the start of work, applicant must provide final conservation and management permit
Oh, yeah.
or determination of no take from natural heritage.
Okay, otherwise it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's a non-waiver project, though.
Okay, I have a motion to issue as amended.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
You said either or no type or.
Correct.
So then I think the next one must be lot 2.
Yep. And I guess I would ask to add that same condition.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue this one as amended?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
And the only other one that we closed tonight, Mr. Chairman.
80 Washington Street extension we've got on the back here, but did that,
No, we didn't end up
That
closing
was-
that.
okay, that's
That was the other bulkhead. A little bit more involved as you're hearing it. We did close the 2 pond coalition ones for, I'll make them long pond. I guess if we start with the one from Hummock, since it's first, that's the aquatic vegetation removal. Is there anything anyone specifically?
Definitely would write something in there about, harvesting operators should monitor bycatch and,
Yeah, like report.
rules they have to produce and mitigate as they're operating. You know, so return turtle stuff, the ponds. I don't know how to, I mean, it's not like we can quantify it.
That's-
Thank you.
Well, they could keep a little tally for the number
Keep
that
the
they,
tally, yeah, yeah.
they
You're
pick
not
up
gonna
and
count
put
every
back.
fish, but, yeah.
no.
Let's see, as far as storage of that material on the shore, if that sits there for a long time, it's gonna be a bigger problem than.
Yeah,
Well, I
the
think
draining someone
The,
on site.
the plan that they presented is they would have the bin that was there, and then it was going, the Bartletts were taking it, and moving it over to,
But like every week, once a day, every month,
Yeah, maybe
or
something.
2020 or something, I mean, it could be really nasty if it sits there.
Has to be scheduled with that.
Yeah, schedule of,
well, we can condition,
When they get to it, probably isn't.
it's not gonna be, well, you know where that, dock is.
I'll just put removal schedule of harvested material.
we probably should have something about the boat must be
It's gotta be
Yeah,
appropriately
cleaning the
cleaned
house, yeah.
before
Yeah.
coming to Nantucket.
And it's a state law, so, but boy, that better be.
So would it get like a
Steve.
certification that's been cleaned before it comes here?
And on the mainland,
It's like every other little sport,
Yeah, like
sport boat. That's-
DCR has
Yeah.
a person out every boat, every pond I've gone fishing, there's someone standing right there going,
Very
"Let's
good.
see your boat," you know.
You see any
And they
barnacles on
actually
their
have
boat?
visual inspection stations. and get
Cool.
Both that and on the wood. you
Yeah.
have people, salaried people that are making sure.
Checking
that-
for
Well, that,
mussels.
that's something that, I mean, if they're having people that are doing those
It was a
inspections,
tremendous problem.
I can probably reach out and see if there's someone to say that before it gets on
That'd be great.
the boat to come
Yeah.
over, that DCR says it's been cleaned to their standards.
And there's people in Miami, yeah. They're pretty serious and they're taking me on that right now because it's such a big problem. It's $1 million problem.
Yeah.
We would be in a world of hurt if we ended up getting that.
Oh, yeah.
Be a big
I'd be
problem.
everywhere so fast.
Livid.
So we'll figure that out and I'll somehow arrange for them to get it pressure washed or steam cleaner or whatever to the satisfaction of to the state for their inspection before it hits the boat to come over.
And if you were saying June, what was the timing for?
I wouldn't say he was saying that June would be the start of it,
Okay, yeah,
the
yeah.
hard thing. Yep, so it's not.
There's maybe a heads up to commission staff, because like I'm trying to go.
Well, they have to let us know when they're starting work. Any project always gives us like a little start work notification or to do it. So definitely, that's something they could just submit, we condition that, 2 weeks prior to the start of work, their starter notification form, because it normally is not that far, but you can condition that further back. So we have 2 weeks heads up that they're going to start, and then anyone that wants to go grab the test or do whatever has 2 weeks to do it.
But done on the turtle is fairly significant, pretty, without too much death and destruction to fish, but it really depends on the operator. Just like on all things, if someone's being thoughtful and not just going 90 to nothing, then it's fine. Then at least the person I talked to thought if it was done intelligently, it shouldn't be too bad of an adverse impact. She did not think that it would affect the phosphate level.
I doubt it's not, they're not.
It's not very much.
It shouldn't be so, for recreational purposes or for clearing some biomass, it might help long term, but
Is there anything else, any monitoring or anything that you want specifically? This is kind of a hard one to.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, I can't think of anything else. It hasn't been pretty made clear in the.
I don't know that we need to think of roadblocks for them. I mean,
Yeah,
if we're protecting the interests that we need to protect, and we got it covered, then maybe we have it covered.
That's very possible. Well, we'll have another chance to look at the draft. I'll have it here, so let's move on to Long Pond.
Okay, Long Pond.
Oh, that's the.
That's the fragmites removal.
So they sounded like they
Spray.
made a pretty thorough, I don't know if I saw their whole thing on
I think it was just the
there. Pre-testing for
Testing.
glyphosate.
Pre-glyphosate testing.
And then, I think he wrote that in the application, what is the post.
And I would think too, that he needs to report stem density to the commission prior to any follow-up treatments.
Well, I think from our discussion earlier, I think that's something we could just condition that we have
Yeah.
kind of an annual sit-down probably once the, their fall report's done. So, January, February of 2016, you sit down, you figure it out, and then decide what kind of return they've had, and say, if you have 90% gone and it's just 10% regrowth, and then you are going to trigger doing it by clip and drip, or if it's 50% regrowth,
Yeah.
you go foliar spray again, and then as you whittle it down, you have that kind of annual sit down and figure that out.
This week's package, did they present your monitoring plan? It sounded like it was fairly substantial, but I'm not sure I saw it today. Was it from last week? Remember, Jim?
I believe it was from the time before with the plots. But that's something that for our plots too that we've done before is I'll use the one that we use for Folgers Marsh where we have them install like a permanent marker on those plots and they GPS those and they provide those locations back to you guys as part of that report. Then if it looks like it's adequately covering, we can always add more or less when we have our yearly sit down. So.
No, it
We
sounded like they
definitely
were.
want more than photo monitoring on this. We need
Yeah.
vegetation
Well,
monitoring.
I know they're planning. I know it sounds like, especially since a lot of this is on land bank land that's going to be going. That I know Rachel's going to be doing their vegetative monitoring from the land bank, so they're going to be actually doing.
Well, he said they were going to do benthic inverts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
And then what we would like to say, before, immediately after, I think that we said like a week and then a month, or I can't.
Yes.
I don't have that. The numbers are marked. And that's really for their monitoring.
Yeah.
And I think it should drop off after a month, but if it doesn't, then
It's probably going to drop off after a week, I bet.
it should. But,
Given that, they're going to be
Sometimes-
spraying a 2% solution, I think he said, and so if you put that 2% and they use a couple of gallons into thousands of gallons of water, it's going to be down to a small fraction of a percent pretty quick.
if there's good circulation.
Yeah, if there's circulation, that's
If
the
it get washed
question.
away, then back, then washed away, then back.
Mhm.
Other than that, just monitoring is really the concerns. Whether.
Is there access issues as far as he's saying there are waders and boats, or?
No, access is no problem, and they also can access from both sides at the bridge. and then also from the land bank.
I do have a problem with them saying we're gonna be spraying it up. It's like, oh, you're just looking for drift, dude.
That's what I was thinking when he said, well, we're gonna be spraying it up. I'm like, well, how could that be?
How can that be good? Yeah.
How can that be good? Were you?
I mean, I understood them that they were gonna do it all out of a boat or from land, but not a low ground pressure machine, which he said would be spraying down,
Down, yeah.
but they're not using it here.
Yeah, well,
So-
Ernie's concern is kind of mine
Yeah.
too, is
No,
when
I
you're spraying up,
understand,
yeah.
yeah.
it's-
And that's how I think he's explaining what we're gonna do.
yeah.
Because it would, you just said earlier, time before, just about waivers.
We should condition a wind speed, like practically nothing.
Yes, we
We've
can.
got to have a wind speed of
Yeah, you've
like,
got to have less, 5 miles, solid 5
oh,
miles.
less than
yes.
that, yeah, like 2 miles per hour or less,
Yeah.
maybe.
I don't know if you'll ever see them.
Oh, that's what it is.
I was gonna say 5 or less, but 14 knots is average wind speed around.
Well, you can't spray up in the air with too much wind.
I know. I think
Well, it's also, there's a big difference between a hydraulic application and a misting type of
Yeah, they're
application
going
in
to be
terms of
using
drift.
bagpipe
It's,
sprayers.
so if they're using hydraulic, it isn't like it isn't the risk of drift that you do out of a misting application.
Yeah, that's true. A big drops, so we should,
If there's any wind at all, it's not going to go where they want it to go. That's all fine, 2 mile an hour wind, but they're not going to be able to do it in any wind. Because that aspect is going to take care of itself.
I think it'll
You
be a
never
lot
know.
more than 2 gallons too.
yeah, probably on.
Well, we always have required for all projects like this, a quantity and
Mhm.
reporting for those, so.
Right, running a pretty thorough plan of attack. And your control projects are far enough away, but we have at least one control site that we'll be able to evaluate downwind drift.
Yes. All right.
Because I know Rachel's concerned about that too.
Need to get a boat with a plank on it that they can walk out on it.
Yeah,
Spray down, you know, and they need to
They
be.
can take a shark, they can spray some fragments.
All right. I feel pretty good. I think I can put something together that addresses all those things without beating the dead horse.
Okay. So that takes us through all that. Then we go to,
Extension.
All right, so this is a reissue of an extension that we issued last time. We had gotten the wrong title information to put on the face of this. It was a typo that got carried forward as a typo, and the bad news for these forms is we can't fix typos because the signatures are on the same page for stuff like this. So all we're asking is we have it correct now, just to reissue it.
So
It's the
moved.
same page as before, so.
okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries.
The registry doesn't let us change them anymore.
Okay, so then we're down to other business. Enforcement actions.
All right, so I handed out a letter at the start, sorry, it missed. Art is here for this as well. This is for 87 Deal Point Road. If you guys remember, it was brought to our attention that the wall that originally had been constructed here, that had been removed, turns out that some of it that was still buried, that has re-exposed, hadn't been removed. So I'll try to summarize this best, and Art can answer any questions. They've gone out and looked, and there's some concern that removing those planks that are there is going to cause a kind of a wholesale failure of the bank because they're underweight at the moment. So they originally looked at just taking the chainsaw and cutting the boards out. They had some concerns. So essentially what they would like to do now in the interim until they aren't quite as underweight as they are now is essentially turn those boards into Swiss cheese, is probably the best way. So they just want to drill a series of holes to open up 50% or greater of that area, and then as those boards exposed, to cut them out, and the ones they can cut out without causing the whole bank to slide. That sum it up pretty well?
Yeah, and if I may, we were thinking just use it like a 2-inch hole saw. And, you know, and it's going to be very labor intensive, more labor intensive, simply cutting. We'll have a problem with cutting, of course, is that the chainsaws are going into the sand as well, so you gotta like go through a chain, a board or something. It's logistically pretty difficult. So the idea is with erosion over time, then you could possibly get some of the boards out that don't have sand behind them, because you could cut without it going in. It's just I don't know how to take it apart without taking apart everything. So with the concern being the transfer of sediment, we were thinking if we drilled, just a hole, put someone out there for a week, drilling 2-inch holes in the board. If that was
It's a mindless job.
amenable to you, it would be a way to try to get it so the sand
Just hanging out, drilling
flows
holes.
underneath it.
I want that job.
Otherwise, if you have, I don't have a really good way to go about it, other than to take apart all of the tubes. And right now, the planting's held up really well through that storm. So that's the project that has the plantings all above it. So it would be the only other way I think we just have to literally take everything apart. And I think you just cut the boards, going through the chain, but trying to do that, the sand's all just gonna come out, and then those bags are just gonna, tubes would settle. So that was what I came up with for an idea, but I'm open.
It's got core behind it, or are you going to picture?
It's above. Yeah, there was, I guess I should have brought, I don't know that I have photos. Those are photos that Emily had provided to you. I don't know that I have any
I have them somewhere.
I'm just trying to.
printed, but I don't. The tubes are in, I had provided, maybe I do right here with this report. I do. So it doesn't show the boards really well, but it shows, this is the post-storm report that had been turned in. And so, you can see here the condition of the bank, of the tubes, and then the boards are way down below the fence, the bottom of the fence. And like I say, they're only exposed when the beach really drops. It's not like the whole thing is all board. It's your picket fence, and then these guys had buried this stuff, the contractor. This wasn't Toscana, so that this was a project that happened.
This is another one too.
Under
See the core.
The previous owner. The house is sold, and the new owner sort of inherited this, thinking, partially on information that I gave him, as well as from the contractor that had told me, that they had ripped it all out, and then we built the tubes, and now we've and I don't know exactly how deep that goes. And my thinking is that you're going to have to pull back a little bit of the sand in order to do the hole drilling as well.
So it's kind of secure.
The tubes are quite secure. I mean, the tubes
You
are.
couldn't just pull everything out from in front of the tubes, the pickets
No,
and all?
the problem, the pickets, sure, the
Yeah.
pickets would come off, that's easy. The
Totally
problem is
hit.
the piles and the boards are behind the piles. So there's no way to unbolt them. They were put together this way, if you will. And so
From the bank
there's
side.
no way to get at that. Even if I was to dig out in front, which I think is what you'd have to do, you still can't get behind these because the tubes are above you.
So what's required of the commission at this stage?
Well,
Well, they've got to remove.
Well, we're just under an enforcement, so we need to figure out, we need to essentially give them instruction to how to rectify the situation.
and the other alternative is, to rip it all apart.
Yeah, just rip everything all to hell.
That would, be our, least, we wouldn't want to do that, obviously. That would-
Do we have a staff recommendation on this idea of drilling the holes?
I really like Art's idea of drilling the holes myself, because I think that
You want that
it's going to
job.
give us access, it's going to provide sediment a chance to pass. I think some of the boards will break
Yeah, they're not that
just
thick.
over time.
I mean, they are, but
Oh, they're
not.
pretty thick, they're like,
2-inch
two-dimensional
true.
lumber, yeah.
Yeah, but they're not like
Does it take a
No.
vote?
4-inch.
no,
Like,
no.
yeah, they seemed a little shy
But
for what they
two,
should have been.
It's still, it's not, it's not an inch and a half.
No, it's like the
I would
next
say,
step up.
I think ripping everything out is kind of contrary to some of our
Yeah,
the legally permitted structure that's there, ripping that out and then probably causing damage to the planted bank and the bank that's there does more harm to our performance standards and our interest than trying to get creative to remove.
So do we need a decision of the commission, or is
So
staff just
Jeff,
looking
we
for
need
direction?
to
or-
have a
Yes,
vote
you
to
guys need-
instruct you to write an enforcement order, is that it, or? do
We have that already.
Oh, we
So,
have that, okay.
Specify what should be in the order.
yes, we're just trying to finish off the rest of that. So if this is the decision is to go with the whole approach, then I'll memorialize that back in writing to.
So moved, Mr.
to
Chairman.
Art.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries with Commissioner Oaktie opposed.
Ooh, with no discussion, was there? I didn't-
It looked like everyone's heading that way.
Do you want to take it all apart?
No, well, let's
I
not
would,
worry
but
about
yeah,
it.
it's,
You would?
I would probably take
Yeah.
it all apart. It actually, you could take it all apart, rebuild it, and probably, I'm worried about
And hang 'em.
holes, and we've already about it, but that boards are gonna come flying out at really inopportune times, and probably have more of a catastrophic failure in the middle of the storm.
Any other enforcement actions?
Nope.
Okay, conservation restrictions.
All right, so I put this on the agenda because this is going to be on our agenda next time. I just wanted to remember to bring it up. It was in your packet this time, the conservation restriction for the land bank. In the Mizzenmast area here, it's 70 Bartlett Road, part of Appleton Road, 28 West Mycomet Road. The land bank is essentially granting the town a conservation restriction, and we are the entity that typically holds those for the town. So in the next 2 weeks, if everyone can get a chance to kind of go through it and see what's there, and then
Sorry,
I kind of
what
looked it
property?
over.
for
Sounds
it,
like my common golf course.
Oh,
yes, the land bank just can't hold conservation restrictions on itself.
Right. of
So
course.
they would like to try, I'm sure, but they.
This is a new one.
This is a new one, so we don't have to act on it tonight because they'll be here. The land bank is sending someone on the 1st to go over it. I just wanted to point it out
So
for
why
sure.
are they doing
Yeah,
this,
so
do you know?
does this give us the monitoring responsibilities over the property then as the holders?
No, we only have to enforce the restriction.
Okay.
So as long as they are doing the work required through the restriction, that's what we are essentially.
Gives us
holding.
rights, but not obligations.
Correct.
Gives us a right to enforce it.
Right. It's very similar to.
Well, we should inspect
Well,
it.
what's triggered it?
It's a deed
Yeah,
restriction.
why,
What triggered it?
yeah,
like an
there's
easement.
something going on here that's,
Yeah.
Something's
what's
up
going on,
here.
Bruce, do you know?
Oh.
You're
No,
not-
the land bank will be here on the 1st.
Okay.
To explain it. I just was pointing out more to make sure to
You
say
don't go in there anymore.
That we
I
read
know.
it thoroughly.
that you read it.
beforehand.
You read it thoroughly because this is something that if you guys devote, that's not what I want to say at all. If you guys vote affirmatively to accept it, you will be signing it as the commission. So please be sure. So that's pretty comical. So
I
that's
mean,
your
it
joke
looks
of the week.
Pretty reasonable as far as.
So
it's
yeah,
kind
go
of a
through it because that
typical-
way, if you have any questions, they'll be here to answer those. We
Yeah,
can hopefully.
kind of a typical
Might be a mass central heritage.
rights
Yeah,
and
well,
restrictions. and-
Natural Heritage also is a third party involved in this.
Well, they have,
Yeah.
So
Makes sense of
Mhm.
space.
they're basically, we're holding the restrictions under their umbrella away.
correct. Well, it'll be incumbent upon the commission to make sure that some of these things that are happening are happening. So I'll just give me another good reason to go run around on these 3 pieces of land and make sure the land bank is what they're supposed to do.
It's a great job.
So conservation restrictions are actually kind of fun because you get to go around and check things out, go out in spots. I at one point actually asked if we could do it for Norwood Farm to make it so I'd have to go out there all the time.
But no.
No one bid. That idea didn't go very far. So, but that's it. That's all I had for that one.
Okay,
So-
approval of minutes. We had the minutes from the last meeting. If there's no comments on those minutes, we'll approve them by unanimous consent. Okay, the minutes are approved. Reports. No CPC, so
Oh,
we.
I'm going to do the CPC
Oh,
report.
Justin.
So, we need to designate a new representative to CPC to replace BAM. Obviously, we're also going to have seats that are up for appointment and reappointment in July at our normal time, and hopefully at next week's selecting meeting we'll have a new 7th member at that point. But we need to at least, even if it's just for 2 weeks, just to bridge the gap if there was something pressing that we needed a representative at the CPC for. We certainly can change in 2 weeks if the new person is really gung-ho about wanting to be on CPC.
Oh, I'm sure they will be.
It would be the first time that's ever happened, but
Make it a job requirement.
I think it goes with that 7th seat, in fact.
That's right.
I think the selectmen will be.
It's the unwritten 7th. And then also, obviously, as we get to the 1st of July, and we do our normal appointment of officers and any sort of committee shift that we want to do then with new members there. I mean, we're really looking just to bridge kind of from April to then. And if someone really likes it or is really interested, I'm sure the rest of the commissioners would probably not be opposed to the person continuing in that spot. But
Does anybody want to sit on this for?
No, seriously, they came to me and said, hey, this good chick.
And to be honest, it would really just save me a lot of phone calls from Neville and from
I'm getting phone calls from
yeah.
Neville, but other people on the CPC.
So
Well, does that mean you want to do it?
No, not at all. No, they just.
Anybody want to volunteer?
again, most of their hard work is over because after town meeting, they hit kind of their quiet phase for a bit because applications will go back out. So if you're going to do it, now is the time to do it until July. I'm just going to throw it out there.
For those who haven't done their stint there,
And this is one time I would happily do it, but I'm not allowed to, so someone else has to.
How often do they meet?
Not.
oh, not often.
Well, Mr. Galanke was prior to BAM, so was it monthly meetings?
A little bit more often in the fall when they're reviewing the applications. It's not really the frequency, it's sort of the duration.
Meeting
It's the
duration.
challenge.
What time do they meet?
Oh, I don't know, from 4 until later.
He must have loved it.
No.
No, I actually think we've outlived our CPC time in Nantucket, and you have this sort of group that's allocating. There's nothing much of a state match anymore, and so you're just allocating tax dollars, and you may as well just do that at town meeting. It's just sort of this like more. And so I'm not a big
coming in anymore because
I'm not a big supporter of the mission of the CPC. So I don't think I'd qualify to represent the town council.
I mean,
Want to give it a whirl after?
I'll bite the bullet and do it for now.
So unless there's a
Yeah!
unanimous consent. Okay.
What you guys didn't know is there was a new car for the person who won outside. There's a new car for someone who won outside.
Good, because mine's not looking so
Well, there's actually a minimum amount of the funds has to go for the open space.
Correct.
And I don't know where they are with that now. Last I knew, there's quite a bit of money there. Did they dip into it this year?
I had quite the argument when our hatchery was there, that the work that was going on at the hatchery was to help rehabilitate open space, and I had a pretty heated argument with the chairman of the CPC at the time, to the point where one of my coworkers kicked me under the table and told me I had to stop. Because he and I were going round and round about preservation of open space and what qualifies as open space.
That's really interesting, and anybody that wants to talk about this outside the meeting and off camera, I can add something to all of that individually if you come in.
Okay. NPDC, Andy.
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. Mosquito control.
I think we had a meeting today, but we didn't have an official meeting of the mosquito control committee because the committee is still trying to evaluate what they're doing. So the state had a state reclamation board meeting, but I will take notes on that.
Anything else?
Actually, for BAM's, we've already raised $1,000 for research on Tucker Nut for the BAM.
Oh, nice.
Just in a week.
Wow. That's a good thing.
Now, how do people go about contributing to that? Is it through Mariah Mitchell?
Through Mariah Mitchell, it's on the It's actually on the Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative website, Remembering We're on TV, and you just click on there and send a check to Ryan Mitchell with Van Lafarge MDI written in. All the proceeds go to doing research, and it has the coconut component.
That's cool.
Yeah. And, I think there's coastal resiliency grant getting started, but that's separate thing.
Okay, commissioners' comments. Anybody want to bring anything up? I'll just say, Jeff, I hope you get Humming Pond open soon, because I'm just flooded all over the place down there.
Well, you're going to have to wait until at least after the 1st of April, because our Army Corps permit doesn't activate until then. So
Okay.
we always do things in compliance with our permits
yeah,
from the town of Nantucket.
Bring back Steve Scannell.
Where's Scannell? With the show.
Yeah, SAG is the same. And we've gotten lots of calls, to get those open and open those early.
we have
So
a little beach
we're
house.
literally setting up
That's
our
what the beach
protocol
house
for the
one is
first
right
available
there.
tide that fits our criteria for tides for those. So to be honest, it probably looks like it's going to be somewhere between about the 10th and the 15th on those to get the first kind of appropriate tide set for us. So everyone's just going to have to hold tight and put the pontoons on. So sorry,
It'll be one to watch.
they'll both be good
A lot
ones.
of water coming out
So-
of those things this time.
So hopefully we'll look out, maybe get a little leaf break, and we'll draw down.
Good
Mr.
flushing.
Administrator, do you have anything to report?
I do, just real quickly, for those, I know two of you guys were there yesterday. Yesterday we had our fertilizer class for the year at the Dreamland. And we had
And who would have thought landscaping is indeed rocket science?
So, yeah, it can get a little involved sometimes, but we managed to put about 250 people through the class yesterday. Again, it's just trying to help promote
That's amazing.
We're just trying to help promote the BMP. We are going to be looking to do kind of a BMP review committee. We'd like to get people other than landscapers on there involved too. Obviously, a good component of them will need to be landscapers, but one of the things that we also just launched and put together that goes with that is off of our regular natural resources page through the town. There's a little tab there now underneath the Concom one that says fertilizer program, and it's a spot that you can click and you can find the class schedule when other classes are going to be offered. We're going to try to do a bunch more little specialty classes through the year that pertain more to, some field work for like calibration of spreaders and things, to be sure, because again, we're not in the want or to prohibit. We want people to do responsibly in accordance with the BMP. So we're trying to get everyone the tools they can to safely and effectively manage those. And it kind of goes with our, our discussions that we're having about septic systems and fishing practices and, mooring regulation changes where we're kind of, the days and the want to, it's this group or this group or this group. No more. Everyone's got to contribute to help make our water quality goals. So it was great to see people there. We had a group from UConn in that were really good. A lot of talk of compost in the afternoon that caused a lot of eyes to glaze over. But I think a lot of people took a lot of good away from it. Some more than others. But again, check out that. That's also, we're going to try to get links and stuff up there for homeowners to get more info or questions to ask their landscapers, or just to try to get more information out for people. So.
And people wanting education, they have response to, would you like to have something specially on ornamental and vegetable gardens? And there were so many people that wanted more training. So that's really great,
No, it's actually pretty cool. The class had, they used a system that can be a little tiresome sometimes, but it's a real time. Everyone gets a little remote control, and they can pick from multiple choice questions.
Mm-hmm.
The little click it thing. So it was really interesting to see a lot of the responses come up for, people's thoughts on the BMP, whether it's, working or not working, what people would like to see more of. Would you try to do different kinds of testing, and if you would, what's your big concern? Is it cost or is it time or any of those things? So it was really great to get nice anonymous feedback where people don't feel pressure to answer a certain way because everyone's answering around them. They can answer hopefully as honestly as possible or to the best of their ability. So we got a lot of good information from it. So hopefully that's another good step in the right direction. Hopefully we'll have a lot more to offer this year and then going forward. Hopefully it's getting a little better each year.
Snow and rainfall is going to be problematic this year.
Yeah, I think you could do a number on soil temperatures and water availability and stuff here early in the season, so.
What was really great about this one was it really focused on how do you tell if you're fertilizing adequately or not enough or too much. And some of the tests were fairly complicated, but nothing that was beyond, you know.
No.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is going to be reaching the homeowners.
Yeah.
So that so the budget will go up for the landscapers to do the proper testing.
Yeah, I think the biggest take back that I took home yesterday was those guys, the group of landscapers that were there were very engaged and wanted to be a part of education. Their biggest concern is getting information to the homeowners and the people that are hiring them to do work.
Would you characterize those people as sort of independent tradesmen, or have their own business, or employed in another business, or a combination?
It was a pretty good mix of people that were there.
Because when you talk about, when it comes down to the cost, I know that I used to do, just anecdotally in my landscape days, I used to, on those kind of the big properties with the guys that like to be uber anonymous and nobody even knows that they have property in Nantucket, and you get sort of like 6 minutes of quality time with a big guy a year, and there's teams of people around him, and sort of one of my things would be, are you aware of the concerns that there are about all this, and people flying overhead and saying the guy with the green grass is an environmental criminal, and that sort of thing, and how does that resonate with you? And universally, I used to get the response of, look, I like my place the way it is. I've got a team to put it together. This is what I want to have here. Don't screw anything up here. And if it costs a few bucks more, it costs a few bucks more. Do the right thing. Yeah. I want what I want without breaking any laws or doing anything. And if I can't have what I want, then I got to dig into this, pay more attention to it, that kind of thing. Give so-and-so a call, let's figure it out. But don't do anything stupid. So I never ran into very little pushback on cost in my landscape time.
I think the cost was more in relation to, some of the tests or some of the devices that people used, more of the direct cost to the landscaper itself. I think
they haven't figured out how to pass that on to
the
the consumer.
It's a lot of them, and it was interesting because I actually had a couple guys approach me after the class, and one of the specialty trainings that some of them were interested in were how to develop a better business model.
Yeah, you need a business coach as well.
Because I know a lot of these guys, it's just not something that they've had to do or have really been a part of. So it was interesting to hear, and a lot of it is just they want the people that they're going to have information that, we're doing these things to take steps for water quality purposes. Or these are why we're doing things a little bit differently, just to get information to them too. So that's something we'll work on.
This is so interesting to me. This is where this whole thing succeeds or falls down, is like so many other things in life, it's all about communication. It's not about government coming down on you, somebody making rules for you. It's, well, let's figure this out, understand, and take it where it needs to go.
Yeah, I think it's really reassuring that some of these big owners, big anonymous owners that are behind a trust are forthright and say, just, try to stay within the law.
Hands down, universally.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
The
really
big ones.
They all give money to the Democratic Party.
Like we had clients, why is a soil test on there?
Why is the soil
We don't,
We have to just
for the
say
environment,
something.
to explain that within their stuff sometimes is difficult,
So
depending on.
I think we're making positive steps. I think
I
is
would
the
think that was the
Yeah,
change
sounds
of
like
the message. Not to
basically, how do you incorporate some of these tests to be able to say, well, look, this test is going to cost you X, but we're going to save X in fertilizer costs and mowing costs, because we're not going to be over applying and we're not
Okay.
going to be over watering.
Yeah, if you can measure in the groundwater, then.
No, let's not tell them it's going to, let's not tell them the costs are going down. Nobody said anything about that.
No, I mean,
You're just reapportioning your costs.
you want to make
Spending smart.
Being responsible.
But it was really a great training. So
You're saving.
You'll have more money
you're
to
saving
spend
millions
on other
simply you're paying
things
for testing.
on your landscaping design.
That's what some of those guys have asked me help with, is to help figure out how to do that and put that together, because something that they haven't had to do before. So,
anything else, Jeff?
yes, and it kind of goes to letter G here, and this is my failing from last time. because my brain was elsewhere. So last time we called an executive session that I hadn't specifically noticed through the town clerk's office, which is a no-no. So I added it this time to hopefully get us to go back and essentially reaffirm what we did last time to get us into compliance. And then going forward, if we think it's something that we may want to add, again, I don't mind talking about some of this stuff in open session either. If I can know in advance that it's something, so if we discussed at a meeting, say we'd like to discuss some of our pending litigation at next week's hearing, could you please notice that executive session so we can stay in compliance? I don't want any of us to get in trouble or have open meeting law issues or have problems. So that was my mistake for missing that last time. I just haven't dealt with a lot of executive sessions in my years.
So we need to go back into executive session tonight and rectify that?
Correct, because we've noticed it for this time to go back to clean up from last time. But then I would say going forward, if we think we may want to add it, to know well enough in advance. And that's something too, if something comes up in the interim between meetings, if someone says, this has come up as part of our pending litigation or something that's there, and someone gets it, I can schedule that with the commission and notice it correctly. We just can't do it on the fly. You can't just right now say, I move to go into executive session to discuss blah, 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 without it being correctly and properly noticed in advance, even though it seems like you should be able to. So I apologize for making that error and not catching that last time, since it's my job to make sure that we don't have those errors. So that's where it is. But other than that, I don't have anything else.
Okay, so I guess we need to, we need to just keep this meeting open, don't we? And then we come back.
Correct. You would make a motion to go into executive session under exemption 3, blah, 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 but you can read it directly from the thing. And then at the end of that, you would vote by roll again to return to open session, at which point you would adjourn the meeting. And I do apologize for the shenanigans of this. I just don't want to get anyone in trouble.
You have to go to the new school tomorrow?
Friday.
Oh, it's Friday, okay.
Friday.
Yeah, Friday. So I can talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, great.
11? 12?